All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm going to introduce you guys to our last, but certainly not least speaker, Marie Kim. She is the advisor and founder at Ivorywood Education, Harvard Admission Office staff member, former Harvard College interviewer, director of the Harvard Summer Internship Program, and she's a graduate from Harvard University herself. She'll be sharing about global top admissions to Harvard, Stanford, Oxford. Take it away, Marie.
Thank you so much, Jenny. It's a pleasure to be here, everybody. Thanks for hopping on. Today's talk will be Global Top Admissions, Harvard, Stanford, and Oxford, brought to you by Ivorywood Education. A little bit of housekeeping and going over the agenda before we get started. If you have any questions, please go ahead and enter them in the chat. We will be sure to follow up with you. And if you have any further questions that we don't get to in the chat, go ahead and email us. hello@ivorywood.com. There may be some examples we talk about every now and then. They are based off of real people, but obviously the true identities of the individuals remain confidential. So today's talk will be broken up into two parts. The first part is, how do you use what you have to get what you want, which is why you're here. And part two is, we're going to focus on how do you appeal to these global top universities. We're talking about Oxford, Stanford, and Harvard. Jenny already gave a brief introduction, but my expertise really lies with these top universities. I am a graduate of Harvard College myself. I did work at the admissions office at Harvard as well, so I'm very connected to that community. If you're especially interested in those types of schools, please reach out to me and at Ivorywood. And what we do is we help students everywhere, anywhere from the 8th grade, 9th grade through high school, all the way to your senior year, to help separate yourself from the pack. So how do we do that? We focus on the non-academic credentials, so everything from your leadership development to cultivating your talent, and even with ideas as you're embarking on those college essays. Seniors, those are very important, so we can help with the strategizing as well as any ideas that you may need as you're working on those college essays. So we are going to get down to brass tacks. Today's talk really applies to students across the board, whether you're at the end of your middle school journey, basically in high school, 9th and 10th grade, definitely 11th and 12th graders as well. And what's the focus of today's talk? It's essentially this, right? You've heard from previous speakers today, right? You've seen case studies, you've seen what other people have done to get in. But I think the reason you're here now is, how do you get in, right? Your path is your own. And how do you figure out from who you are and what you've done and what you're capable of reach these top global universities? And that's what I'm going to break down for you. So why don't we take a look at this map? And so what is this map essentially about, right? You want to kind of think of it as, you know, what kind of student do you think you are at this stage in your life? And everybody sort of got their own pace, right? So you may recognize a couple of these, like a combination of them, or you may like quickly realize, oh, I'm one of these. So at the top of the map, you want to look at the icons of the brain and the sparkle and think of it as maybe intelligence, basic intelligence, and talent. And then to the right, you see the little hammer. So think of that as being industrious, you know, hardworking. So these sort of attributes are a way of measuring and also indication of potential success. They're definitely not assuring it, but they're attributes that facilitate success in college admissions. And so if you look at these different quadrants, you've got the wolf with both pretty much. And then the hare, you know, they've got the smarts, but maybe not the follow through as much. And then diametrically opposing the hare, we've got the tortoise. The tortoise, you know, we know is steady, solid, a hard worker, but maybe they don't initially sparkle. And then we've got the sloth over there. There's hope for the sloth. You just may need to take some steps sooner and get some more support. And like these individuals are still really trying to just like get out of their comfort zone and figure things out. Okay, so very briefly, let's go through the 4 archetypes that we just talked about. Again, as I go through these, I want you in the audience to try to relate to any of them for yourselves, because once you can recognize who you are and the type of student you are, then you can figure out what are the areas that I could get support in, or what's the direction and pathway that best fits who I am to try to strive for these global top universities. And that's what you're working with, right? That's why I'm going through these traits. So if you're the fox, you're a go-getter, you're active, you seize opportunities, you're motivated, and you're driven, and you're always sort of thinking ahead for the future. I might say one thing I notice about foxes is sometimes they underestimate themselves. And I think that's probably a characteristic of why, even though they accomplish a lot, they continue to drive forward. If you're the hare, at some point in your life, you know, people have told you, hey, you're smart, but you know, if you just tried a little bit more, you could really accomplish great things. Maybe you connect with that one. And so think about if that's you. Sometimes these individuals, they do have high intelligence, they do have some talents, but something about whatever it is, it can be complex, it could be internal, it's getting in their way, and it's not helping them pursue opportunities. And so keep that in mind. The tortoise, again, you know, very consistent, reliable, takes a long view, doesn't expect instant gratification, and seriously, just through hard work, they get to their goals. And the sloth, they're the types of people who, you know, at this stage in their life, they, you know, have these dreams. They're kind of like thinking about them, but there isn't really any action, and they don't know how to get to the next step. And that's where, again, I'm going to show you what those opportunities look like, whether you're the sloth, whether you're the tortoise, or any of these other archetypes. So take a second and again, ask yourself, which one of these archetypes do you feel resonate with you? Because that's kind of the springboard off of which you're going to figure out, what do I need to do next to strive for these global top universities? So on this sheet, there are 7 factors we're going to go over. And I know 4 is missing, so please overlook that oversight. Anyway, there are 7 factors here. And we're going to go through these because if you're thinking of global top universities, you need to think about these sort of 7 factors as things that you have within your control to determine your fate in these university applications and this journey. So if you are mindful of them and you understand who you are, you want to figure out what are the ways that I could further reinforce some of these factors to help me get to the success that I want in admissions. So the first thing you want to think about is, what are your innate strengths and abilities, right? Again, go back to that archetype. Some of you guys know off the bat, like if you're in 8th and 9th grade now, you know, hey, I don't stand out in any particular way, but I know I work hard. So you got that going for you. The hare knows, hey, I'm smart, but something is not motivating me to, again, pursue these great opportunities. So keep that in mind. The second thing anybody can control, your attitude, right? There's going to be a lot of things that happen throughout this journey of admissions, and you want to be somebody who can power through with that optimism and that positivity. Some people, even if they get the best opportunities, they don't appreciate it, they're ungrateful, they complain, they whine, and that shapes and colors their relationships and their progress and their performance. So keep that in mind, because that's within everybody's control. Reference points, what are they? Okay, every one of us at some point have some sort of like reference point, and those are the things that we set as standards and expectations for ourselves. So depending on what you designate as your reference point, that's kind of what your North Star is. You're comparing yourself to where that thing is or that individual is. So 2 reference points that are really in contrast might be, one student from a young age has already been thinking Oxford, Harvard, Stanford, like since they were 8 or 9 years old. So that's their reference point. Everything they do from then on is probably going to be in some way influenced by that reference point. Some students, they're in 10th grade and they know they could do better, but their reference point is, hey, I got a bunch of friends. If they don't get into their college of choice, we can go to SMC. SMC, Santa Monica College, is a reputable community college, but it also has a 100% acceptance rate. So, you know, you figure out what is your reference point that is driving your actions forward or holding you back. Support. I think this is incredibly important. So in this journey of admissions, there's going to be things that you're going to be able to pursue if you have the support. So if there are research or summer programs, they cost money. You're going to have to find a way to get that monetary support. If you're struggling in school, maybe, you know, these days mental health is a big issue. So if you've got some mental health challenges, finding that moral support so that you can bounce back quickly. That's also important. And obviously, like educational and practical things, right? If you're trying to be involved as a high schooler and you're trying to get out into your community and make an impact, because that's what these universities are looking for, well, then you're going to need the practical support. Somebody's got to give you rides, somebody's got to like support you through those things. And that's very important. Now, people come to us and say, look, I don't know what my passion is. I don't have any interests. So if that's you right now, then go put yourself in a lot of experiences. I guarantee you, if you don't have the answer to those two things that these colleges are looking for, then once you start the experiences, you will start to answer those questions for yourself. It can be very vague at first, but once you plug yourself into the action of some experience, you're going to walk away with something, whether you realize, I hate that, I never want to touch that again, or, oh my gosh, I love medicine and I want to keep powering through. Or, you know what, I did the medicine program, so I want to try law. So these experiences shape your interests and your passions. The next thing I love, and it's very important, is discipline. You could take a prodigy and a genius, and if they don't have discipline, they're not going to succeed in admissions. So you need discipline. 8th through 12th grade, you need to power through, chug through, especially when you don't want to do it, especially when you lack motivation or you get setbacks or you get rejected. And the last thing you want to do is face your fears. You got to have the discipline to get up and go back to, get into the grind again. The last thing is very important, strategy. So sometimes we deal with students who are remarkable. They come to us and they've got, stunning accolades. They're clearly an academic powerhouse, but it doesn't matter. You can have all that and get rejected, as you know. And a lot of it could be hinged on the strategy of your application. What's the major you select? How are you positioning your application? So keep that in mind, because you may have worked for, you may have worked like a fiend for a decade of your life, but if your strategy is off, okay. Opportunities, again, going back to each of you sitting here in the audience today. If you have recognized an archetype that closely resembles who you are, let me tell you what the opportunities are, right? So if you're the hare, you know you've got some capabilities that you've got in your favor. Work with them, right? So if you don't, you're going to squander your talent and your intelligence. So go get somebody who's going to sort of like provide the support to help you harness those strengths and then also help you stay consistent. Then you can get through 9th, 10th, 11th grade and then get your way closer to these global universities. If you're the tortoise, right, we know you work hard, but you may not be shining in some remarkable way initially. And I see this all the time. You just need to start sooner. Right? So if you're hearing this as a middle schooler, start now, because if you are aware, hey, compared to my peers, I'm not really standing out, well, then you can work hard to eventually stand out. So by the time you get to 9th grade, you've done the legwork and you can start hitting the ground running in 9th grade. The sloth has hope. Okay? Again, I think the most important things for the sloth is, look, you don't know how to get there. You don't know what to do. You want certain things, but that's not enough. So you need to bring somebody into your life, an organization or an individual who will advocate, support you, and maybe even really sort of walk you through and hold your hand until you are now starting to sort of stand on your own feet. And then getting out there, get out of your room, get off the phone, go into the experiences, because the experiences are going to show you and reveal to you new possibilities. And finally, for the fox, okay? This is very important for the fox. You've got a lot going for you. You're smart, you work hard, but that's not sufficient. You need a good strategy. And also, as you're heading into these essays, I'm going to go into the Oxford, Harvard, and Stanford essays. You're going to see many of the foxes I've worked with, although they are highly accomplished, their ideas fall flat by the time they reach the essays. So that's really important with these universities. And that's where if you can get somebody to brainstorm your essay ideas or think about these sort of big picture questions, then you have a better chance of standing out in your application. Okay, now we're going to get into the actual global top universities that you've been waiting to hear about, right? These schools, Oxford, Stanford, Harvard, they are unique institutions. I know that sometimes when you just see a list of rankings, it's hard to not see the difference, but they're different. And so your job is in your application. How do you appeal to these universities based on what you do before you get to the application, but also what you end up submitting and putting in the application? So let me go through that, right? The way you want to think about Oxford is they cut to the chase. What can you do? Prove it. They don't want to hear a bunch of like embellished passion on the application. They've got clear like cutoffs, right? And you hear that in US university admissions. You often hear admissions officers saying themselves, oh, we don't have cutoffs. No, that's not the case for Oxford. If you are not prepared by the time you're a junior or a senior to qualify, you probably can't even apply to Oxford. Whereas you could change your mind at the last minute and throw in an application to Stanford and Harvard for the most part, but that's not the case for Oxford. So if you're thinking, hey, you know what, I want to go international, wherever you are in the world, and I'm speaking mostly to maybe a US audience, but even like in Korea. So if you want to go to Oxford, I guess what you need to think about is, what are they looking for, right? They're looking for substantial academic horsepower. Why? Because the educational learning system in Oxford is very much intellectual. It's very much academic, and it's very much tutorials based. And that's a kind of learning environment, essentially, where you sit with an expert in that topic or subject with a couple of other students, and it really grills you. It exposes your knowledge and intelligence level. So if you don't feel comfortable sitting around in a small group, articulating your perspectives and like really thinking critically about ideas, then this might be a real struggle for you. And you probably wouldn't make the cut in the first place. So you need to be a student starting from middle school and early high school, developing that habit and those skills that they really need in their institution. And those are people who could really pound out 40, 50 hours of academic work per week, because that's not a small endeavor. And also you have to be able to withstand academic pressure. So a lot of people, you know, they're smart, but you start putting deadlines on them and they got like dissertations due in 2 weeks. They crack under the pressure. They get stressed out. I don't think this is a place for you. Because again, you're going to have to do that for 4 years. So be mindful of that. And if you want to strive for an Oxford, then you can lay the groundwork early on. There are different requirements to get into Oxford. So I'm going to go through a couple of them, right? First of all, they're going to look closely at your academic transcript. Have you taken actual classes that fulfill the course requirements of the chosen course? And Oxford calls your major your course pretty much. So I'm going to use that for now as I'm talking about Oxford. So did you take the classes in high school that they consider as kind of like prerequisites to prepare you for the particular course you're saying you're applying to? So again, as opposed to Stanford and Harvard, where some people talk about, oh, being undecided, then that's not going to cut it with Oxford. You better know very clearly what you want to study at 15 years old. And you better be prepared by 17. Hey, this is my future plan. I'm going to do this when I'm 20 and 30, right? So again, you have to really check off a lot of academic boxes from 8th, 9th, 10th grade. And so think about the planning that's involved. The other thing is they add these admissions tests, and these are subject specific tests. So let's say you want to go into engineering, or you want to go into the maths or even history. You're going to take a separate test in physics or math. There's a PATS, the HATS, the MATS, you know, they've got all sorts of acronyms, but you're going to have to take an additional test. Again, another qualifying requirement. When you get invited to an interview, it's called being shortlisted. This is what happens. In US interviews with Stanford and Harvard, which I did for 10 years, I'm going to tell you what happens. I am trained to try to understand the person. I'm trying to get to the heart of who they are. I'm not giving them a, you know, like a really difficult analytical question or even a brain teaser in the interview. Although I know I've heard that some interviewers do that, and it's up to them. But in these interviews, they get technical. And they also really want to know how you think on your feet critically. And are you able to problem solve and think through complexity? And so just look at some of the questions. How do you design a gravity dam for holding back water, right? Or are our deaths bad for us? And how do pirates divide their treasure, right? Most people, if you're not trained to think like that on your feet, you're going to squirm. Like this is something you got to come in prepared for. You can't wing it. So you got to be somebody, I would say at the start of high school, training that intellectual firepower. Also, the thing that they'll ask for are things like written work. So essays, research paper, things like that, usually from your junior year. And so that is something that you can prepare in advance, and it's going to probably be graded. And you're going to submit that as evidence of your ability to write well, because there's going to be a lot of writing at Oxford. And as opposed to the US, right, we live in a climate of a lot of test optional. That's not happening at Oxford. You need to submit your SAT or ACT scores, the full battery of it. They're going to ask for your AP scores. They want to see nothing less than 5s on those scores. If you don't have enough AP scores, you better support it with an SAT score. I mean, so like if you're getting the point now, this is not the school for you if you don't do the preparation. So if you're a underclassman, this is a time to get going with this because you can prepare. And if you do, then you're good. Okay. The personal statement for Oxford. So what is this, right? I believe that they changed it due to the anxiety around artificial intelligence. The question changed this year, actually. It was pretty much the same for a long time. And then ChatGPT came on board and shook the industry. So what they did in a very clever way is they changed the questions so that you can't just make an AI generated essay. And I don't think any of you would be foolish enough to do that with such high stakes schools. But when you look at their essay questions, they purposely frame the questions so that you have to talk about your experience on a very personal level. So I'm going to go through some of those questions, right? What previous or current study is relevant to your course? Do you have work experience that will help you on achievements and skills that make you perfect for the course, right? What plans do you have in your future career? You can't make ChatGPT write this. It better match up with what you've done and what your referees or references are saying about you and based on what you've taken in high school. The other thing about Oxford is they're going to ensure that you show evidence through your academic experiences. So there's more of an emphasis on that as opposed to what I'm going to go into now, Stanford and Harvard, which is more holistic, right? They're going to look at other things beyond that. And when you think about Stanford, right, you think they are, the Silicon Valley citizens. They are the Bay Area babies. They're at the hub of tech innovation, and they take tremendous pride in that identity. So they're recruiting students who can amplify that sense of mission, right? So if you are applying to Stanford, show that in your application. Show that you're somebody who can participate effectively and confidently in a community of creative and accomplished people who are driven to discoveries, because that's the kind of school that sends people to the Googles and the Facebooks of the world. So think of it that way as you're approaching Stanford's application, but also in high school, as you seek out opportunities, think about aligning yourself to those values. You want to bring in superior preparation for Stanford's community because that's really what they're looking at. They're looking at what can you do for Stanford? So let's look at some of their essays. These are the fun short takes, okay? And they're like 50 words, but they're really a window into your personality and your soul. And so sometimes these questions take longer than a 250-word essay. And so I'm going to go through a couple of them. They want you to tell them, what do you think is the most significant challenge in society? Tell us about a historical moment. What are 5 things important to you? And how do you spend your last 2 summers? So a combination of these questions give them a taste of the diversity you bring, right? What are your interests? How do you think about stuff? This is very important to them. Harvard and Stanford care a lot about intellectual curiosity, intellectual vitality, and your personality. It's very hard to find people with it all. You're going to find people often who are smart, but they're not the most personable. That's not what Stanford's looking for. You might find somebody with a great outgoing personality, but they don't have the high school record to show that they can handle academics at Stanford, right? So you got to sort of be the whole package to get into a school like Stanford. And so when you, like, I'm going to give you an example for the first question, right? Most significant challenge. Like these days, I hear often, right, teen mental health, right? Or right? Addiction to social media. Do not write that. Think of something original, okay? Even if it takes you a couple days. Okay, so going back to the sort of the ethos of Stanford, right? They're community driven, they're looking for collaboration. And let's look at their other essays. One of them asks you to write a note. The second one's asking for your distinctive contribution. And the last one is, again, deeply curious about learning. Again, think about what they're looking for. It's not just a list of accomplishments, but you don't have intellectual curiosity. It's not just about being, a straight A student with perfect scores, but you don't have the personality to mingle with people in the community. So when you look at these essays, you want to think at the forefront of your mind, how do I really show personable qualities? How do I show something original and unique in the way I think? So you do experiences to figure that out. Because you're not going to figure it out just sitting in your room. You figure it out from the things you do to start to ask questions about the issues in the world and then to cultivate and curate your own perspective. All right, my favorite, Harvard. Okay, I agree. So Harvard is very similar in sort of the evaluation emphasis, the personality, the intellectual curiosity, and vitality. But here's what's different about Harvard. They want to take a student with potential. They want to take somebody, and if you power Harvard behind them, how far could they go? That's what they care about. Why? Because they love the Harvard brand and the stamp all over the world. And they are doing everything possible in their mission to cultivate citizen and thought leaders and truth seekers. So their motto is Veritas. It's Latin for truth. And I actually experienced this myself. I was somebody who, and to this day, I do seek out truth. And I definitely think my learning and education at Harvard has compelled me to do more of that. And so what are the types of people who end up at Harvard, right? Or who get into Harvard, right? You're bold, you're courageous, you're a trailblazer, right? You think for yourself, you question status quo. Some people may find that annoying. Especially parents. Some people might find that, right, disrespectful. But you do it in a respectful way and you show intellectual humility. But it's got to be somebody who questions the way things are, and that's how you tap into improvements in society. If you just go with the flow and you don't think like a contrarian, then everything is going to stay the same all the time. And that's exactly what Harvard doesn't want. They want people who show evidence of really thinking for themselves. The other thing is I see a lot of ambiverts at Harvard. So what is that? You can be introverted, but also extroverted. So they're both good at it, right? They're good at both of them, right? I think to have high academic performance, you have to in some ways be good with being in, solitude and studying, and that's the introvert. But if you want to be a citizen leader and show impact, well, then you have to be gregarious and you got to be social. So that's where the ambivert comes in. I think overall, they're looking for people who bring some originality and something remarkable about them. They created a committee called the Intellectual Vitality Committee. Let me explain why this is so important. Because if you want to see the world move forward and make progress, you need deep thinkers, not people who just think superficially. You need people who enjoy sitting around and being contemplative and pensive and ask questions that other people aren't even thinking. So once you start asking those questions, and then if you have the follow through and the discipline to execute it, that's how you get innovation. That's how you make change. And that's the kind of institution Harvard is. So they're looking for evidence in high school of you being capable of doing that. And they really prize that because it's a kind of talent Not everybody works on this talent. But if you do, then you can appeal to a school like Harvard because they're really looking for that. Not just straight A's, not just SAT and AP scores, but do you have intellectual depth and intellectual vitality? I'd say Stanford and Harvard both changed their essays also for this year in response to the affirmative action ruling. So in sort of a circuitous way of not thinking about race in the process, they're throwing in these questions where you can't talk about being African American or Hispanic or whatever underrepresented race that you are in these essays. And it's a clever way of trying to glean some more information about your background. But I would say, if you're listening right now, you're probably maybe of East Asian descent, most of you. If you're not, okay, but I'd say most of you might be of East Asian descent and Korean. This doesn't really apply to you. You need to draw into your experiences to figure out what is the diversity you bring, because you don't have an ethnic diversity. So think about your life experiences and what you do throughout high school. And the last thing, I'm going to show you what roommates want to know about you. This is really important. People at Harvard, they're trying to look for people they love, they fall in love with. When I did interviewing for students, I fell in love with the students and I advocated for them. Be somebody people love, because that's important, not just like, but love. Okay, so now you have all these insights. You know what kind of archetype you are. You know who you are. You know what your strengths and your weaknesses are. Take that knowledge and do something with it, okay? You need to take mindful steps wherever you are, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, or seniors, right? You need to think about, how am I going to get to my goal with who I am, and get the support along the way. It's natural for your motivation to flag. Life happens. It's okay. Just get back up. Some days you're going to only have 50% output. No problem. The people I see getting into Harvard, Stanford, and Oxford, it's not that they didn't have these problems. They did, but they just continue to power through. And that's the thing that you got to keep in mind. My final remarks, okay? Again, all you out there, including seniors, right? Keep this in mind. What you do with your time, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, what are you doing with your experiences to shape your voice? Because that's what Harvard, Stanford's looking for, right? What are you doing to shape your contributions, goals, and interests? Because that's what Oxford's looking for, right? Go get support. Because you're not perfect. I'm not perfect. I got support. We all need it. So think about where you can benefit from getting that support, and you can get in. The other thing is, keep in mind your reference points, because that's internal and external. That's going to drive your action day in and day out. And the last thing that I want to say is, look, you got to have discipline for anybody. I don't care how much of a prodigy you are, you still need discipline to get into these schools. And there is a prescription. It's a little complex, but there is a prescription. I shared it with you. So if you'd like to speak with any of us at Ivorywood, reach out. We are offering complimentary orientations, and we work with students at the early stage of high school all the way to seniors who are working on their college apps. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marie. That was such good information. Even I was taking notes. It was so interesting. I wanted to just do a couple of questions. We had a few questions through our chat, and then other people that had asked questions as well. You talked about Oxford. If I want to apply to Oxford and I'm already a junior in high school, so in 11th grade, is it too late for me to start planning that?
Yeah. So no, it isn't. So make sure you've got the, let's say, the academic requirements in place. Go to their website. They're going to show you, break it down for you really clearly. Hey, if you're going to major in engineering, or if you're going to major in math, or even in public policy or philosophy, they will lay out for you, get these scores for us, get these SAT, APs, IB scores, whatever it is. So you have this year to do that. So it's not too late. And also, you still have this year and next summer to work on some work experiences, extracurriculars, supercurriculars. Those can go into your personal statement for Oxford. So it's not too late. You just need to get on it now. Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, whoever was out there, you have not lost hope. You can still do it. How do I prepare for Stanford and Harvard interviews? I feel like this is a question kind of across the board. A lot of students are concerned about the questions being asked, but just like wanting to be that person that's loved, right? So how do they prepare? What would
I think the interview tends to freak students out. I think one of the things is it's something that takes time sometimes to develop. So for you who are underclassmen, right, you want to practice day in, day out, being the kind of person your teachers love, that the administration loves, and your peers like. Right? You want to be that kind of person. So who is that kind of person, right? Somebody who's not stingy, somebody who's not like uber competitive, somebody who's not like spreading rumors. Don't be that kind of person, right? Like be somebody who's generous and nice to other people and open-minded, because I think we all gravitate to those types of people and we respect them. That's not going to change by the time you go into the interview. You're going to exude that, you know? So I think it happens then. But let's say you're a senior going into your interviews, right? Prep. I would say, talk to somebody who can walk you through some interview questions, and then really in a targeted way. Hey, your response about what you said, like why you like, this particular class, let's say English, and you said, oh, it's because I got an A in it. Like that's the kind of stuff you want to filter out, right? You want to talk about, oh, I love writing that Great Gatsby essay. I love like working on that project and then giving a presentation and helping out my classmates who are like really trying to understand the symbolism. Does that help? Totally.
Yeah. And just so you guys know, I think bottom line, be a good person. Admissions are going to want good people, right? And being a good person is kind of at that top of that. Okay. What is the most deciding factor to get into Harvard? Would you say?
Well, okay. Let me get, past the foot in the door standard sort of criteria, right? Like you gotta have good grades, right? Pretty much. You gotta have a strong academic high school record, and yeah, you should have done some extracurriculars. But definitely, I'm gonna say this: it's the personality and the personal, and that's why they've been in this lawsuit for this whole time, because they're trying to recruit diverse student body, right? Because they're looking at that person, their background, those experiences that have shaped who they are as a person. And that's why they keep fighting for the diversity on their campus, because it's not just about your high school record. It's not just about your achievement. They're looking at the person. So let's say you bring a unique racial or ethnic background, or you don't, but you're a kind of person who's tremendously, right, like loved and respected by people. They want those. Why? Because those things don't really change, or they don't change. You can always work hard to get better grades. You can always do more activities. But the person is I think I'm pretty much the same person that I was when I was 10. That doesn't change very much. You can work on it. Absolutely. The experiencing can shape that. But you can have everything and you cannot be the right personality or person, and you'll get denied.
Awesome. And you just mentioned something about legal stuff. So I do want to ask a question. Harvard's in a lot of heat right now because of the legal things. I guess students and parents out there want to know, how does this impact Asian students in particular, right?
Yeah, well, actually, if you've been following sort of the trend of admissions with Asians, since this has been front and center in the news over the last couple of years, I would definitely say it has impacted their admissions evaluation and outcomes. So they are slowly like adding a couple more Asians. So it has been beneficial to you because they have been scrutinized in the public eye, and that has put a little bit of pressure on them to admit a couple more Asians. And so I'm going to say this. I think as far as I'm aware, they are still a university that prioritizes diversity of thought, vigorous inquiry, right? Diverse student body. And I'm a proponent of that too. I don't want to go to a school where it's a majority Asian. And it has nothing to do with being Asian per se. It's that I want to experience that diversity for myself in my learning experience. And I think for them as well, and I think that's why they put in those essays, because they're still trying to recruit a diverse student body in spite of what's going on in the news.
Perfect answer. And then cutoffs, GPA cutoffs, SAT, ACT score cutoffs. Like, what GPA would you recommend, or what SAT, ACT score would you recommend for students who are trying to apply for Harvard and Stanford?
Yeah, I mean, the ones you see getting in, right? You can see 1520s, right? 35s getting in. And then, you know, they got a bunch of APs and GPA, right? Like pretty much mostly for 4 years, or at that point, it's 3 years and a semester. If they do early, it's 3 years. You kind of have a flawless record. It might not be impeccable, but like maybe a couple, maybe a B or two, but you try to want to like you tend to see the students whose academic record is pretty impeccable in school and have taken the rigorous course load, and you see like it's not uncommon to see 4.0 unweighted or like 3.9 something unweighted, and then the weighted 4.8, you know, 4.78. So again, I'm just saying you sort of have to hit all the mark. Yeah. Like you just got to be the whole package.
Yeah. So pretty high is pretty much what Marie's saying. And then just last question. When you get offered an interview for Harvard or Stanford, like what does that mean? Does that mean like I'm getting in? Does that mean they want to know about me a little bit more? So, you know, because they're not giving interviews to everyone, like what does getting an interview actually mean?
Yeah. And I'm going to say this. Sometimes it's hit or miss, right? Like basically, you might get an interview, but you're not really on Harvard's shortlist. And I know that's a little disappointing to hear, because you're thinking, then why would they interview me, right? Like, why are they taking that extra job? Well, because the interview is contingent on factors that are sometimes beyond the admissions control. So depending on your location and the availability of people to interview you, you might be in a place where there are more people who can interview more students, so you get the interview. But that's not a signal that you're on their short list. But I will definitely say this. If Harvard is serious about you, they will even go after a second interview to really know you. So I know how important it is. Because again, you know, Jenny asked, what's really important? It's the personality, it's the personal stuff. Because they want to recruit people who are going to be that person as long as possible, right? And that's why, like, the interviews are a way for somebody who's been to Harvard or an admissions representative to sit down and really get a feel for that individual. So yeah, it could be a good sign, but it's definitely not gonna assure, you know, you have a high chance of getting it. Nothing like that. And Stanford doesn't even like you don't even have to do an interview. Sometimes you can get into Stanford.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marie. That was so helpful. I'm sure all of you who are thinking about these top tier universities, Stanford, Harvard, Oxford, even people who are trying to go to schools outside of the United States, I'm sure this was incredibly helpful for you guys.